Hi everyone, welcome back to Storytime Recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the film from 1999, Sleepy Hollow. Without any further, let's get started. The movie begins with a guy writing his testament before he and his son go out on a journey. When the father hears something, he goes outside to discover that his son has been decapitated. The father leaps out of the cart and flees, but before he can get very far, someone chops off his head. In New York City, Constable Ichabod Crane discovers a corpse in a river. When a higher authority orders the corpse to be burned, Crane suggests that they at least do pathology testing, in order to determine whether the individual was alive before being tossed into the river. In the municipal watch house, Crane suggests that because the year is almost over, they ought to be depending on new scientific techniques to determine the true reason behind killings and fatalities. In response to Crane, the higher authority suggests that he visit Sleepy Hollow, which is located in the Hudson Highlands. He is informed by the authority man that 3 individuals were killed there, and each of them had their heads severed. He advises Crane to bring all of his scientific experiments over there, in order to find the murderer. After gathering the things he needs, Crane heads to the Sleepy Hollow. When he arrives in the town, he is already nervous about it. At a residence where a large gathering is taking place, Crane stops a game of picky witchcraft and runs into Katrina Van Tassel, telling her that he is trying to find her father, Baltus Van Tassel. Baltus walks in with his wife, Lady Van Tassel, and Crane, who introduces himself and explains why he is in the town. Crane is given a room to call home. Baltus introduces Crane to some of his close associates, Dr. Thomas Lancaster, Reverend Steenwick, Samuel Phillips, and James Hardenbrook. Baltus introduces himself as a farmer who has greatly flourished in this town, and the people also looks up to him as a council member. 3 persons were murdered: Widow Winship, Peter Van Garrett, and his son Dirk Van Garrett. Their heads were severed and removed. Baltus and his followers believed that the Headless Horseman was responsible for all of these crimes. Baltus informs Crane that the Headless Horseman, a Hessian mercenary, loved carnage and would decapitate the warriors on the battlefield while riding a black steed named Daredevil. After running into the forest, the Headless Horseman found 2 young girls close by. He urged them to stop talking, but the young girl snapped the branch, which led to the Headless Horseman being discovered, buried in the western woods, and beheaded with his own sword. People are still haunted by Hessian to this day. Crane hears their fear and promises to investigate. Later that night, a gunman named Jonathan Maspeth is pursued by Hessian and also beheaded. The next day, Mr. Killian gives Crane a horse named Gunpowder, and when the people discovered his dead body, Crane questions how anyone could know the names of the victims when their heads were removed during the murder. After examining the body, Crane determines that it was cauterized, as though the blade had been red hot. Following Jonathan's funeral, his young son Maspeth offers Crane his assistance and services in an attempt to exact revenge for his father's murder. Although Crane declines his assistance and instructs him to take care of his mother, when Maspeth informs him that his mother has also died, he takes him under his wing. Phillips informs Crane that Jonathan was the 5th victim, not the 4th, and that there are 5 victims in 4 graves. Crane removes Widow Winship from her grave, and after performing surgery on her, Crane discovers that she was pregnant. While he is aimlessly going through the town, a headless man attacks Crane by flinging a burning pumpkin head at him. Later on, it turns out that the 3 young men who were playing with the Crane were Brom Van Brunt. Throughout this ruse, Crane also experiences memories to his mother. And upon waking up the following morning, he meets Katrina. Following an extended talk, she gives him a book about the charms of the spirit realm as a gift, and they continue to spend time together.
I used to play by this hearth as a child.
After seeing Phillips disputing with Baltus's companions, Crane runs into Phillips again and informs him that there has never been a Headless Horseman and that he thinks the incident is a fabrication. When they both hear the sound of a horse approaching them, the Hessian then shows up and decapitates Phillips. Crane is shocked and spends most of his time in bed. He also had a memory of his mother's affection for him and how his father used to torment him. The next day, Crane gathers his courage and departs with Maspeth in search of the Hessian's final resting place. Crane informs him that, in his opinion, all of the murder victims had some connection to one another. Both of them enter a cave and meet a witch. After setting Crane down, the witch claims to know the site of Hessian's tomb. But before she can do so, she leaps on Crane and displays her horrifying appearance. She informs him that the Hessian's burial is next to the tree of the dead, and the witch faints on the Crane. While on their way to Hessian's grave, Maspeth and Crane hear something, leading them to fear that someone is around. Katrina has shown up and says she has come to help Crane and Maspeth. Before they get a chance to share a kiss, Maspeth informs them that he has located the tree of the dead, while he cuts the tree's roots and discovers other severed heads. When Crane digs Hessian's tomb, he discovers only the body, and not his head. Crane concludes that when someone removed Hessian's head, Hessian would keep beheading people until he regains his own head. Suddenly, Hessian emerges from the tree and mounts his horse to go out. Crane also follows him. Hessian enters Mr. Killian's home and attempts to decapitate him. Despite Killian's heroic resistance, Hessian takes over him and does so. Hessian is not finished yet. After he has already decapitated Killian's wife, he hears a sound and begins to shatter the floor, discovering the child of the deceased couple. Hessian does not spare him either. When Brom notices this from an area near the house, he shoots down the Hessian. The Hessian rises too, but doesn't kill Brom. The Brom is still determined to fight Hessian, but he is far too strong for the headless horseman. When the Crane shows up, he informs Brom that the Hessian is not pursuing him today. Hessian still stabs Crane and murders Brom in a vicious manner. Crane isn't in too much pain, and upon awakening, he tells Baltus that he doesn't think Hessian kills people randomly. Instead, he targets those who have been personally chosen by the person who removed his skull from his tomb, since Crane believes that person is controlling Hessian. Crane gets another flashback to the time he saw his mother in Iron Maiden being tortured and died. When he awakens, Crane informs Katrina that after his mother passed away, he lost his religion due to logic and reasoning. He also claims that he shouldn't have come here because the spiritual world is interfering with his ability to reason using logic and facts. The following day, Crane and Maspeth attempted to connect all of the killed individuals. He attempts to make sense of everything, and every indication points to Baltus. Following their meeting with James Hardenbrook, Maspeth retrieves his father's bag and extracts the testament that Peter Van Garrett wrote prior to his and his son's deaths. According to his will, Peter left all of his riches to the widow Winship, who had secretly wed him and was also expecting a child. Crane thinks that Baltus and his friends were aware of the testament and attempted to seize the treasure for themselves. Due to the fact that Van Garrett's whole estate will be transferred to his heirs, Reverend Teenwick was aware of this as he handled the marriage. Dr. Tom Thomas Lancaster attended to the expectant widow Winship, while Samuel Phillips provided legal protection and James Hardenbrook kept the documents hidden. According to Crane, Hessian was called back to kill Peter, his son, and Winship first. Later, he killed Jonathan Maspeth since he was their servant and a witness to the testament. After that, Samuel Phillips was assassinated, and all others involved were executed so that the wealth might go to Baltus. When Crane gets home, he discovers Katrina with the proof that he could use to accuse Baltus. She is upset with Crane. After finding a drawing of an evil eye beneath the bed, Crane thinks Katrina has been doing this all along. Through the night, Crane follows Lady Van Tassel and discovers her having love with someone. She also wounds the palm of her hand in the process. Then Katrina destroys every piece of evidence that Crane has collected.
Your father has the motive.
The following day, Lady Van Tassel requests that Crane keep from discussing what he saw her doing with another man. Baltus shows up and orders Crane to leave the village, as everyone is against him. As everyone gathers at the church for a meeting, the Hessian shows up and chops off Lady Van Tassel's head. Baltus then rushes to the church and locks everyone inside. Katrina starts drawing something on the floor, and Crane observes that the Hessian is unable to enter.
He cannot enter.
Everyone is telling Baltus that he should give his life since Hessian has come for him and not the others. Hessian picks up a metal object that resembles an arrow and hurls it directly toward Baltus. When he manages to escape the church, Baltus is beheaded. When Katrina faints at the sight of it, it is evident that she was drawing an evil eye on the floor. The following day, Crane bids Katrina farewell. Maspeth believes Katrina wasn't the one who would summon the Hessian, but Crane tells him not to believe something that might not be true. During his journey home, Crane pulls out the book Katrina left him and discovers that the drawings she used to do on the ground served as a shield for her loved ones from the evil spirits. Crane halts operations to examine the bodies of Lady Van Tassel and Boltus. After looking at Van Tassel's hand wound, he comes to the conclusion that such a wound could only have happened when the victim was dead. Later, to Katrina's surprise, she discovers Lady Van Tassel alive. She takes Katrina to the closest windmill in the area. Lady Van Tassel calls Hessian and asks that he decapitate Katrina this time. She killed and beheaded the housemaid to simulate her death. She tells Katrina that she lives with her parents and sister. Her parents were employed by their landlord, Peter Van Garrett. After his father passed away, Peter threw them out for the Baltus family. Her mother looked after Van Tassel and her sister, but she also died in the woods. She and her sister saw Hessian slaughtered in front of them. At that precise time, Lady Van Tassel gave in her soul to Satan, pleading for him to exact revenge for her and her family's mistreatment on the Van Garretts and Baltus. A few years later, when she married Katrina's father, she learned all about the wool and the riches. She called upon Hessian to kill everyone involved, and after Baltus's death, he left all of his fortunes for Katrina. She also killed the witch, her sister, who brought Crane to Hessian's grave. Crane and Maspeth arrive, and so does Hessian, and all of them are able to escape after setting the windmill on fire. As the three of them flee on the horses, Hessian runs after them. They are barely repel him and able to push Hessian far into the woods. When Lady Van Tassel shows up and shoots Crane, the bullet strikes the book Katrina handed him inside his coat, saving him. Before Hessian could decapitate Katrina, Crane returned his skull, which had been in Lady Van Tassel's hands. Katrina is spared by passion, and he replaces his skull to restore his appearance. Hessian enters the Tree of the Dead and takes Lady Van Tassel with him. Crane comes home with Katrina as the new century approaches. Thanks for watching, and remember to turn on your notifications to watch more movie recaps like this one.